Well, he was a hard one to track down because he's so high in demand. Max Heineman is with me, CEO and co-founder of toldright, elite production company. We're going to dive into that, learn about his career and what he's done in rising up the rankings, but also about him as a dad and learn the full picture of who he is here on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Vox Sports Radio, also a tennis and golf commentator. Max, I'm excited to have you on and tell your story. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I know it's long overdue, and apologies that we couldn't get together sooner, but appreciate your patience. Excited to talk to you today, Bryan.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to touch on is certainly we're going to look at your entrepreneurial spirit and learn about your mindset, your determination. And as you sort of look at your past, and even when you were a child, and you start to think about signs from even those days that sort of would foreshadow who you would become today. What am I going to learn about you in those early days to tell me that you are headed in the direction you are today?
I would say that there's two things from my childhood that are unique, both different in different times of it. And early on, I grew up in an era where having a mom who was the breadwinner was maybe not as common and obviously the norm in a lot of cases today societally, right? Still a lot of challenges for equal pay to get over, but back then it was very uncommon in the 70s, right? And so I saw this person that had this big executive job and really understood what it meant to have, what hard work was, and really, and my dad was a teacher. And really put in a lot of time with his students, and just you saw what hard work meant because you had two parents that were working really, really hard, and you kind of just got used to that, right? So that's number one, and they instilled that in me, right? If you're going to do something right, or don't do it at all, right? It was kind of their motto, right? Like, and then as that progressed, I was encouraged to go find the lawn mowing job or the paper route, or find a way to earn your own money. And that turned into finding 3 ways to earn your own money, right? Whether it was washing people's boats or washing people's cars or mowing lawns or just doing odd jobs around homes for, older folks in our neighborhood. I did a lot of that, or getting a job at a restaurant and being a busboy and then working your way up to waiter and bartender and all those things. And then when I first got out of college and wanted to live in New York City, right, in the late 90s, that required me to have 3 jobs to be able to afford it on my own, right? There was no safety net, right? So it was go to your job at a regular PR firm or corporate job, and then in the evenings and the weekends, find other ways to make money, working in bars and restaurants and things like that. So, and I wouldn't do it any other way, right? It's very true. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. It definitely gives you an edge, right? So that I think the exposure to hard work as a young child, people who worked hard, and then being encouraged to do it myself from a young age are probably the things that kind of led to that unearthing of that entrepreneurial spirit, right?
The inspirational influence that you talked about with your mom, most specifically here, and I've learned a lot about your story a little bit, kind of getting ready for this, and sort of the battles that she's overcome in the past, and how even that was a source of strength for you to see what she went through. How did you grow and learn to have a different perspective on life and business, and how that's helped you today, seeing the persistence that growing up that you saw that she had to sort of follow through and follow through on?
Well, the other side of that, as you know, is that she also survived breast cancer twice, right? So in addition to being an incredibly hard worker, we also as a family went through with a decade in between of being cancer free, right? So imagine what that is like, right? And so you see her go through that, and that kind of doubles down on what it means to, never give up and never allow yourself to, to not have a positive attitude, right? That's all of that also encourages you to take it one day at a time. Her saying when she was going through all that was, life by the yard is hard, life by the inch is a cinch, right? And so I think that's a very telling statement. And, and if in a way, and I'm obviously not comparing her to a Navy SEAL, but she's pretty awesome. But the Navy SEALs kind of think the same way, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And that's, if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to kind of have this mindset that the road to success is always under construction, right? It's always going to be hard, right? It's always going to be hard. So anyway, I don't mean to get us a little off track, but I just thought
No, this is nothing off track about this. This is what I really wanted to dive into, because for people to understand what you're doing now, I think it's so interesting to hear what you were like growing up and the influence and the impact of your mom and in those early formative ages of your life to help better understand who you are today. So I really, appreciate that. Max Heineman is with me, CEO, co-founder of toldright. I'm Bryan Fenley. What do you think is the best idea that you've come up with so far in your entrepreneur run here that is your finest work?
When Adam Herzog, my co-founder, and I first started talking about working together, we thought, well, Max, you're the business guy from NBC Sports and Comcast. I'm the Emmy award-winning production guy. Maybe we just create a production company and we look for customers and we do great work and we fulfill a need. And that was great. There was nothing wrong with that. But I think the real light bulb moment was when we saw a lot of our friends from below the line functionalities, right? Producers, directors, writers, audio techs, the real technicians that make content happen. We saw them getting laid off and furloughed and then rehired as gig workers. And at the same time, the gig economy was exploding, right? This is now 3 years ago before we found investors. At that time, I was quoting a Wall Street Journal article at the time that said 52% of Google's employees were gig economy people. They were not full-time employees, right? And I'm like, well, if it works for Silicon Valley, why couldn't it work for corporate America, who has this burgeoning increase in need for video content because they're dealing with video endpoints that they've never had to deal with in either talking to employees or customers before, right? So what was happening at the same time, market forces were creating a supply of super talented creators who now had free time, right? Their talents weren't being warehoused at ESPN where you were, or NBC where I was, or HBO or CNBC. And at the same time, corporate America's need for great content for intra-company communication or customer communication was going way up, like too fast. They couldn't keep up with it. And so all we did, the light bulb moment, was that instead of creating a production company, let's create a technology company that just connects a supply and a demand that can't find each other, right? And so the best, you'll appreciate this because you've done golf before. I was walking Augusta with a friend of mine in 2019, in the spring of 2019. And I was explaining to him my idea, and he had been an early executive at Uber. And he said, if you curate great supply, demand will have to find you. And so what we did was we really took a painstaking approach to curating all of those gig folks that are now in our, we call it the neighborhood, are now in our neighborhood, where we've vetted them, we've onboarded them, we make sure they're great to work with, they're 5-star in their discipline, they're all over the country. We've done all the legwork. So at scale, we can bring that Emmy award-winning content creation to corporate America, who has this out of control scaling need, right? That was the kind of the light. When he said that to me on the golf course, it's like, okay, we're on to something. That was, he's kind of said that out of the blue. And I was like, I'm going to use that in my pitches because it really is exactly what we're trying to do.
You mentioned you're onto something. That's the name of this podcast. So, of course, you are such a perfect guest to be a part of this conversation. Max,
I tried to work it in there some way.
Yes, exactly. I promise I didn't pay you to say that. Max Heineman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How about the fact that you got to walk Augusta? Beyond what that did for you in that conversation, and the symbolism of Uber and how you were able to take that conversation and really help the upstart of your company, but just being in the presence of nature, what did you experience being there walking Augusta?
Well, I've had the honor and privilege to walk it a few times at various tournaments because of my previous career at NBC Sports and Golf Channel. And as any golfer will tell you, it's St. Andrews, it's holy ground, right? I mean, really, and it's just a wonderful place. But I think when you walk it and you really appreciate the undulation, the change in elevation, the wind, a lot of that doesn't come out in the TV broadcast necessarily. Now, credit to the folks at NBC Sports who, during the women's Augusta Women's Open, Augusta National Women's Invitational, they did a wonderful job, I think, showing what the women were going through in that up and down challenge, the uneven lies. They did a nice job doing that, and they have continued to do that in the broadcast. I think that shows the golf course in a beautiful way that most people necessarily didn't see it before. But you see some of these places where Bubba Watson hit that shot, that incredible shot onto the green, or Adam Scott overcame in a playoff in the rain. You can imagine some of these shots that these competitors have hit. It's awe-inspiring. Yeah.
What is awe-inspiring about watching you and how you've parented your 3 daughters?
Oh, what's awe-inspiring is how incredible they are because of how much time, effort, and energy my wife has put in. Right. I mean, she has dedicated the last 15 years of her life to giving them a safe and secure and loving foundation that you now, as they get older, see it takes root in their personality. It takes root in the way they interact with their friends, the way they interact with each other as siblings and their grandparents. And they become just these wonderful, dynamic women. And hopefully I play a small role in that, but it really is her that has done that. And it's pretty awesome. Now I will brag a little bit. My 14-year-old daughter, her name is Chase. She just made the varsity golf team. 14-year-old, maybe that part of it I contributed to, but taking her and her sisters to lessons every Saturday for the last 8 years. But we have a wonderful instructor here in Florida, and Chase is very excited to be on that team. So, but she put in the work, and it's exciting to see her flourish.
No doubt. And so you've taken her to get lessons. What about you taking her out on the golf course yourself, and the moments that's happened, and what you can glean from that time you've had with her on the golf course, and just seeing her grow in that realm?
Yeah. You've probably heard this, a lot of dads will say, just be around, right? Just be there, be available, be around. You're never going to get it right. I think that's sage advice. And so golf has been this constant in our lives just as a family, right? Where it's an opportunity to just be around, right? You never know what's going to come out of a conversation in a golf cart, right? It's a chance for them to open up and share. And it's not you asking them how was school today. It's not, you're not grilling them, and especially as they get older, I think it will be a place where we really can share ideas, share stories. I foresee it to be that type of opportunity for sure.
It's that organic moment. Yeah. You're not pushing anything. You're not burdening them with questions. Like you said, yeah, how was school? They're the ones who come out and say it on their own volition, unpressured. And that's right. Like you said, you get to have those really meaningful conversations. The conversations in which your wife has been supportive of you, what do you think has been her greatest contribution to you being able to launch toldright and believing in you in seeing this through?
It's a great question. I think going through the pandemic and seeing her be a mom, managing the home, becoming a teacher, basically, working with our kids at their schoolwork for 2 years effectively, and coaching them through the mental and physical of that. She's running a company, right? I mean, if you think about the financials of it, the human resources part of it, the day-to-day management of it, right? It is no doubt that she is a CEO. Right. And so her being able to focus on that and say, hey, I got this. You go focus on being an entrepreneur because you now have 13 employees and over 2,000 people in the neighborhood you're trying to find work for because those people are out of work, like go do that, right? And her ability to let me go shoulder that while she shoulders this. Certainly at the end of the day, we're still coming together at the dinner table, and my office in the living room, or excuse me, in this part of the house is only 20 feet from her office, right? So we're still here together, but it's been a very supportive relationship. And I've said this, you probably heard on other podcasts, but when you become an entrepreneur, it really is a decision and an investment by you and your family and your significant other. Everybody's situation is different, but if there's other people in your life, they have to be on board or be encouraging in a lot of ways to make it, give you the ability to go do it, right? Everybody's circumstances are different, of course, but in my case, it was a family decision, and the family was incredibly supportive to say, go do it.
How do you celebrate wins in the family?
That's a great, well, I think it's not necessarily celebrating wins. It's something I would call having confidence checkpoints, right? Like we obviously get excited when someone gets a great grade or Chase makes the varsity team. Obviously, everybody in their own way gets excited when something great like that happens. But what I try to do in my own career is have what we call confidence checkpoints, right? This is part of growth mindset. So I'll share it here as a tactic for entrepreneurs. And the way I do it is I use my calendar. Okay. And I go back and I look at where were we on the calendar? Who was I meeting with a year ago? Right. What were we doing a year ago? And and then you look and say, wow, look at how far we've come. Yeah. Right. And now I've taught my children to do that, to say, okay, when you're having a bad day or you're kind of micro focused on some little thing that happened, look at how far you've come. Like go back and think of the milestones that led you to here, and be really proud of yourself that you're here with so much other things you've accomplished. And then that one thing that's going wrong doesn't seem so big anymore, right? And that's been a great tool for me from Karen Allen, who you, I think, have met before or know, who's a growth mindset coach, an incredible tool. And I've tried to pass it on to the whole family. And so we definitely, we celebrate, but then we also look at that achievement in the context of everything else, so that we can really almost flush out like delegitimize, not delegitimize, wrong word, so you might want to cut that out, but we lessen the impact of that momentary issue, right? Or you think you've hit a roadblock as an entrepreneur, that kind of thing. Take stock of everything you've achieved, because it's probably a lot.
How surprising is it when you take that approach where you actually convince yourself, maybe initially you were thinking a certain way, and then you're like, wait a minute, I've done so much more than I thought. And for you to take that mindset, how does that sort of, from a morale perspective, just help you in your approach and what you want to accomplish moving forward, to go and routinely check in with yourself like that? Because I'm sure that a lot of people don't do that, but the idea of routinely checking in with yourself and sort of giving yourself a little minor pep talk, how much of a powerful instrument has that been for you in your journey?
Incredibly powerful, right? So two people I'll quote in this instance because I think it's applicable. One, Bill Gates has said on the record, people grossly overestimate what they can do in 1 year and grossly underestimate what they can do in 10, right? And then if you look at the current success that Tony Finau has had, I know we just watched a clip earlier of you calling his stuff on ESPN Plus, right? PGA Tour Live. But he said recently, based on those 2 wins he had, right, and the recent success he's had, I never was not here. I just chose to stick it out for 5 years and keep going and going and going, right? And so, and then eventually it happened, right? You can't navigate the Sahara Desert in a straight line, right? You can keep going forward, but you might have to go sideways for a week or two to be able to find the next stage to go forward. And so people as entrepreneurs need to understand that if you're constantly doing that confidence checkpoint exercise, you're going to be proud of yourself, and that is going to allow you to keep going when you face adversity, right? It's those people that can use all that to face that adversity head on and then keep going, or go around it, or find a new plan, have that's going to give you the confidence to get through it.
I so love what you just said right there. And being that behind this conversation platform is I want people to be inspired. I think you really hit some really meaningful topics there, in ways in which you use your routine check-ins and the ways in which you focus not so much on like a large scale, but individually microscopic look to build and to build and to build, and then to see what you can achieve when you have that sort of micro focus and not the macro. And then the macro ends up being really great, but starts with the micro focus. Max Heineman is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. I have one more question for you as we sort of wrap up this conversation.
Sure,
and you talk about prideful moments in your life and what you've done. How do your kids communicate to you that they're proud of you?
Wow. You've got some profound questions here, Bryan. These are great. These are challenging questions. I love it. As a girl dad, right? I have 3 girls. They're 14, 11, and 7. We have a really good time together. There's a lot of hugs. There's a lot of movie nights, right? There's a lot of time together. I think they just, like I said about me being around to listen to them, they're always around and accepting of what daddy's doing, right? They know that I'm working really hard, and credit to my wife, Amy, they know that I'm doing it for us, for them, right? And for my colleagues and my teammates at toldright, I want them to see me working hard for them, because they're working doubly hard than I am, right? And so I think the way they show it to me is that they work hard and they have a smile on their face and they roll with it, and we have a lot of laughs, and like I said, there's hugs every morning to say goodbye to school, and there's hugs every night to say goodnight to go to bed. And that's really all I need. I don't necessarily need them to say, "I'm proud of you, Daddy." I think just them understanding and appreciating what's going on, because they all do, is the way that they show it, for sure.
It's those actions. It's understood. You don't have to say it. You just, by the actions in which you're just describing, they get it. And you see that. And I can't imagine how big of a hug you gave Chase when you found out that she had made the varsity. Speaking of hugs.
Yeah, she was pretty excited. So,
well, there's so much excitement coming out of toldright. I'm excited to see this thing continue to take off. And
thank you.
What you've done is just remarkable, and continue to do with Jason and Adam and all the great folks you work with over at toldright, who I've had on this conversation platform. Finally, great, Max, to have you on. Thanks so much for making the time, and thanks for allowing us to tap into your mindset in the business world and how you are able to use that to really steer success into what your visions have been, especially for your company and toldright, but then also learn about you from a personal aspect. I think that's fascinating, learning about your upbringing and learning about you as a father, and going on golf course treks with your kids, and the conversations you're able to have there that are so organic and natural and meaningful. So Max, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm Bryan Fenley, and thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Loved being here, Bryan. Thanks for having me.